Hi, I'm April, and happy Modal March! For the entire month of March, we are talking about the musical modes. Yay! Modal March! Last week we talked a little bit about what modes actually are, and we discussed a little bit of stuff about Lydian mode. So if you haven't seen that video, it's here somewhere. But this week, I decided it would be fun to do the minor modes. The minor modes are Aeolian, Dorian, and Phrygian. So today we're going to get started by talking about Aeolian. Now, Aeolian is also known as natural minor. So the way to start this with just using the white keys would be starting on A. Just like in our previous video, we are going to use the solfege syllables. So those are those do, re, mi syllables that we use in place of notes in our scale. To give you a better picture of how we're going to use those solfege syllables, we're going to talk about them in terms of the chromatic scale. When we say chromatic, it just means a scale using all of the notes, which includes our black notes as well. Do, di, re, re, mi, fa, fi, sol, si, la, li, ti, do. Do, ti, te, la, le, sol, se, fa, mi, me, re, ra, do. As a side note, I personally use movable do, which just means that do can be any note on the piano, so it doesn't have to start anywhere specific. There is also a thing called fixed do, in which do is always C. Both are great ways to use solfege. I just personally prefer and learned with movable do. So here you can see that I highlighted all of the notes that we used for the major scale. When we talk about Aeolian mode, we are now using these notes. So as you can see, the difference between the major scale, or the Ionian mode, and the natural minor scale, or the Aeolian mode, is that major uses mi, la, and ti, whereas the natural minor would use me, le, and te. So we're just bringing those three notes down a half step. Now, when we talk about the minor modes versus the major modes, we're talking about making small alterations to those specific scales. So for instance, when we talked about Lydian mode, we talked about just bringing fa up to fi, so up that half step. The minor modes are really just using that Aeolian scale and then making those little modifications in the same way that Lydian was modifying the major scale. So we're going to start with Dorian, because Dorian is the second of our modes. So if, again, we wanted to use just the white notes, we're going to start on D. And with that D minor as our tonic, or as our home chord. Now, as a reminder, all that we're doing here is we are starting on D, and then playing all of the white notes until the next D. And you can see that it starts on a minor chord. The scale itself sounds really close to minor. It just has that one tiny little modification from the minor scale. Do you think you can find it? Yeah, it's the lay going to la. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. So in that example, we only have two chords happening in our chorus. I've transposed it a little bit, so it was normally E minor to A, but here I'm doing D minor to G, both of which would be Dorian progressions. To really cement this in Dorian mode, we have that la, which actually kind of falls at a really useful place in our melody, because we're not really expecting it at the end of that phrase. So our melody here really just mimics what is happening in the chords. We're just arpeggiating the chords. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The reason this feels really powerful is because that la doesn't feel expected. By this point in the song, we actually haven't heard that la. So it's actually kind of sneaky. It's a little bit of a surprise for the listener because we don't expect it to be in Dorian. We think it's in D minor. So it's really, really cool when we finally get that note and it's just in the chorus. And in my opinion, the fact that it's in Dorian really makes this song special, and it makes it sound really different from how you expect it to sound or how other kind of similar songs might sound. In your own songwriting, try that same exercise that we did with Lydian, where we're playing that D minor in our left hand. When you think of your lyrics in the Dorian mode, keep in mind that we are in a minor sounding key, but that you don't have to be kind of held back by that connotation of sadness with Dorian. And because you get that note, you get to either use it the way Tears for Fears used it, which almost felt a little bit eerie, or you can use it as a note of happiness or hope in an otherwise dark sounding key. The other mode that we're going to talk about today is Phrygian mode, which is our third mode. So again, if we're using that major scale, we're using E minor as our tonic. The difference between Phrygian mode and minor is going to be that Do, Ra, Mi. And immediately we know that we're not in minor. I sense there's something in the wind. So right away you can really hear Ra, Do, Ra. So we're cemented in Phrygian really fast in that particular song. And I don't believe it actually stays in Phrygian, but it's a really good jumping off point, and it's a really good place to start when you are talking about the Phrygian mode. And actually, Nightmare Before Christmas is a really interesting place to talk about modes because there's such a distinction between all of our different holiday worlds. The way that Danny Elfman actually wrote that music is really telling, because whenever we're in Christmas Town, we're hearing major, and whenever we're in Halloween Town, we're either hearing minor or Phrygian. So you can even think about the modes as being trees in a circle in the forest that all use the same notes, but sound really different. Now, as always with Phrygian mode, we're going to start with our tonic, and when you experiment, use chords that are going to accentuate that ra-do sound. So here we're using E minor going to F, but we could also use E minor going to D minor or E minor going to B diminished, as long as we're in the melody accentuating ra, that F. It's really fun to come up with lyrics for Phrygian mode specifically. It almost sounds a little darker than minor because you do have that lowered re going to ra. Even if you're unfamiliar with the modes, it sounds pretty dissonant right off the bat, and it sounds really distinct. Phrygian mode is used a lot in flamenco music, so it has those kinds of associations, but it also has a kind of darkness to it, because we are a half step down from what we're used to hearing in that natural minor scale. So if you're going to write in Phrygian mode, let us know. You can use your lyrics to really paint a vivid picture. So those are our minor modes. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, make sure you give it a like, leave me a comment, we can chat, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. Happy Modal March!